800 European banks have tapped the ECB's 3-year loan programme. The total figure taken up was €529 billion, which was above most of the forecasts. This comes after December's uptake of €489 billion by 523 banks. Chris Walker from UBS joins me now in the aftermath of this announcement. Chris, given that the LTRO figure came in above consensus, will this be perceived as a positive for the Eurozone?
Yeah, I think the key is that it did come in above consensus, but not massively so. It was only probably about 30 or 40 billion above consensus, which sort of fits in with how the markets have really reacted. People aren't really chasing Eurodollar too much higher, but the likes of Aussie, Kiwi, CAD, and all EMFX and other risk currencies are rallying. So the initial sort of reaction feed through from that, of course, is selling Euro Aussie, selling Euro CAD, selling Euro Kiwi, and that really fits in with our sort of view of markets at the moment, because it is generally supportive for risk appetite, but it's also relatively negative for the euro, because bottom line is that this is fresh liquidity entering into the euro system, and it does have a sort of QE through the back door effect on markets. At the same time, of course, you could argue that in a context of some of the tail risk being removed with regards to Greece, and at least in the short term, and then risk appetite can remain quite stable, and this extra liquidity pumping is only going to help the euro risk crosses push lower.
But if we take a step back and analyse the implications of the ECB expanding its balance sheet by so much, won't this just cause problems further down the line?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of sort of longer-term drivers behind this. Obviously, the fundamental problems in the Eurozone are ones of growth, and they are ones of fiscal policy, and this does not do anything to address any of these problems. And sort of the cynic may say that perhaps by prolonging the potential crisis, you actually sort of take the pressure off policymakers in order to push through measures which need to be pushed through. So there is that sort of line you could take in it. And specifically on the LTRO, we are pumping a lot of liquidity into the system, and when you sort of go 2-3 years down the line, you've got to ask the question of what people are going to do with this liquidity, how they're going to unwind the transactions. But I think at the moment, these are questions which need to be addressed in 2 or 3 years, not in 2 or 3 months. So the initial reaction is still risk positive.
So do you expect the euro dollar to push much higher?
I don't see too much higher for euro dollar itself. I mean, we actually see a fair amount of euro downside, and as I said at the start, we would prefer playing that through the likes of euro CAD and then euro Aussie. For euro dollar, I think it's going to remain fairly flat, to be honest, because yes, it is still sort of, the correlations are still set, so it does tend to appreciate in terms of a stable risk environment. But you have a sort of added dynamic of we are pumping now an extra 530 billion of liquidity into the system. So I think, yeah, for euro dollar, it's sort of, it's being pulled in 2 directions. But if you look at a sort of valuation sense and the extent of the rally we've had in 2012, it's now sort of time to start fading that move, I think.
Let's talk about Ireland quickly. The Prime Minister announced Ireland is likely to have a vote on the fiscal compact. Is this a big deal for the whole Eurozone? Yeah,
it's hard to say exactly how big it'll be right now, and I think it shouldn't really come as too much of a surprise, because this is what happened when you have European policymakers trying to sort of trample over the notion of self-determination and sovereignty. And as we've seen with Ireland in the past, they're not willing to accept that very easily. So in terms of whether the vote will go through, it's very tough to say. If you look at recent polls, it looks like they're about 50-50 at the moment. And even though the 2 primary parties in Ireland are broadly supportive of the fiscal pact, it's your everyday person on the street who's going to vote for or against it. So it's very sort of touch and go over what's going to happen. If we do happen to get a no vote, obviously it's bad news, particularly for Ireland, because it sort of pushes them back away from the sort of core of the Eurozone. But it's not really sort of a massive game changer for the Eurozone itself, because they can't actually veto the fiscal pact. They don't really have that authority. What it does mean, it has bigger implications probably for Ireland itself, and I think it would probably be a bad decision to vote no. There's another sort of clause in the treaty that any future ESM bailout funds will not be able to be tapped if they vote no.
Okay, thank you, Chris. We'll continue to bring you interviews with big names in the financial world here on Dukascopy TV. But for now, goodbye.